said, I'm Donna Shafer. I'm the Deputy Chief Counsel at NASA Johnson Space Center here in Houston. Nikki, I am honored to have had your firm reach out to me to ask me to come here to speak to all of you amazing young individuals who have very bright futures. I'm privileged to be a part of it. Tonight I want to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my agency when I began my career in the government, and kind of how we have evolved to what we do today, and some of our very important work that I think has to be mindful and has to be intentional. So, if everybody will get in my Wayback Machine, which is not the same as a space flight vehicle at all, but we're going to go back in time 30 years when I started my career at NASA. Now, keep in mind, I never intended to have a career at NASA. NASA was a place I was going to work at for a little while I went to law school, before I went out into the real world and got a real lawyer job. So 30 years later, here I am, still at NASA. So if you think about NASA and many of the images that come to mind when you think of human spaceflight, you think of the Johnson Space Center. The management at Johnson Space Center, our senior leaders, when I began working there, white male leaders. There was only one exception in our senior leadership team, and that was the director of our Equal Employment Opportunity Office, who happened to be an African-American male. That was it. There were rules, a lot of rules, when I started work there. Some of them were spoken about, so you knew them. That helped. Some of them are unspoken, which makes it incredibly difficult to navigate when you don't know the rules. So I'll tell you one of the largely spoken about rules when I started, and for those of you who haven't come to visit the Johnson Space Center, first, please do. Second, please call me, I'll set up a tour. And so if you haven't seen it, it's very much like a college campus. So it's set up office buildings, we have labs, we have all over the place. So it's a big campus. I worked in an office building, but not the big office building where all the leaders worked. And one of the spoken about frequently rules are that women must always wear skirts or dresses, always. We didn't dare go near the director's office, their building, if we weren't in that attire. And that really just meant that we always were wearing dresses or skirts as women, because you never knew when one of them would come to our building, and you had to be in the correct attire or know a good place to hide. I got pretty good at hiding. So on those days where you dare to wear pants to work and you are a woman, it becomes a problem, right? And so it's the stuff that we all know is a rule. It's a silly rule. But back then, that's what we dealt with. So one of the other rules, and this one, never did I hear a word spoken about this. Never did I hear anything written down, but it was for sure a rule, and one that I could feel when I was around certain people. The rule was, you've got to be heterosexual to work at NASA. And so I went to a colleague of mine and said, you know, I'm really kind of worried about our friend who works in human resources, who I'm fairly certain is gay, but cannot come to work and feel safe. Can't be himself where he works, can't be true. Everybody's talking about their family. He can't talk about anybody he cares about because it's not safe at NASA to do that. So let's fast forward about 10 years. I start work at the legal office. So the first part of my career, I was an information security specialist while I was going to law school at night. And Nikki doesn't know this about me, but I'm the first in my family to go to beyond high school. I'm the first in my family and the only one to have gone to higher education. And I'm not from this country, but I'll tell you, you make your own paths, right? And that's what you guys are learning to do. That's what you need to stay strong about doing. That's what you need to stay focused on, where you're going. Don't let people get in your way. And so I joined the legal office, and I'll tell you that it wasn't my first interview with the legal office. The chief counsel who was in place at the time I interviewed didn't like women working in his office. We didn't belong there. And so a few years later, we got a new chief counsel who took a chance on me. And so I joined. I was the third female attorney at the Johnson Space Center. The second came months before me. So the first female attorney at NASA Johnson Space Center, she was thrilled to see us. So happy, in fact, that we started going to lunch once a month together. We called it Lady Lawyers Lunch. Or L3 because it's NASA and we have to acronym everything. And so we continue that tradition. My colleague always paid for lunch. We knew, and the second attorney also has my same first name, so it's two Donnas. But we knew she wasn't paying because of us or because of anything we did. She was paying for that out of gratitude for no longer feeling alone. Having someone who looks like her to talk with, what about this, what about that? And she was just grateful. She had the tough job. She was there working for a man who did not want women in his office. So, okay, let's fast forward a little bit more, maybe about 10 years. And what we find at NASA is we're starting to evolve. We're starting to figure it out, right? It takes us a long time to change things, especially when they're so entrenched. You know, I was kind of laughing. I'll jump ahead for a second and tell you that one of our very senior leaders yesterday was talking to a group of us. We're part of a cadre, which I'll tell you about in a second. But he's from a Big Ten school, white male. He had privileges, and I'll talk about those in a second too. But one of the funniest things he said was, you kind of don't know what you don't know. And coming from the environment in which he came from, he comes to Alabama, Marshall Space Flight Center, big part of human space flight program. People talk with a very strong Southern accent there. He had to overcome this idea in his mind that if you talk like that, can you possibly be smart enough to build a rocket? And so it's interesting because it's just his biases. It wasn't intentional. It's just something he wasn't ever around. And so, you know, we get a little bit better. We create employee resources groups. So we have a bunch of different groups. What we do to help them is we have executive sponsors at the senior level. So each employee resources group gets 2 executive sponsors, members of senior staff, who will come to their meetings, help them with whatever it is they need help with, and then really just make it okay for them to be who they are, whichever group they're in. So we do this, take these kind of small steps. The ERGs help us with onboarding. They help us with recruiting. We're looking for building diverse teams because one thing we do know today, and we know it well, diverse teams are the best teams. We get kind of in our own way when we are drawn to people who look like us or who came from the same backgrounds. You want to build a strong team? Make it a diverse team. Find people from places you aren't from. Find people that you wouldn't otherwise talk to and bring them into your team and see how successful you are. And so we've been talking for probably about 5 years at this point at NASA about, you know, we've got a lot of data. We like data. We live in a lot of data at NASA. What our data is showing that we've got a problem. We need to do something. We need to stop talking about our problem and do something about our problem. And so the last step that we kind of took that I'm probably most proud of my center for is we started a cadre. And it's our deputy center director leads it, just to show everybody this is important to us. And it's a cadre of folks who are focused on inclusion, diversity. That's what we do. We spent time together. We went on a retreat together. This is fun for scientists, engineers, and I'm the lawyer too, because I always think we have HR, so people around us have feelings. So we did these exercises, which really kind of as a leadership group with diverse backgrounds. We have engineers, we have scientists, there's a lawyer in the room. And so we did things to kind of break down barriers between ourselves. How do we learn to trust each other better? And you do that through being vulnerable, right? What about you do I not know? How do I connect better with you? And so we do these exercises, and we start to get to a place, and the goal is get to a place where we can have these difficult conversations. That group started about 1.5 years ago, and one of the things that has come out, and so these are pretty intense, very emotional conversations. They tend to be, if people are going to be real. And so we gather in a room and we separate people of color and white people. And we pass out cards and say, let's talk about privilege. That was our last thing. And so privilege is a big word. It's a word that gets emotions really high, really fast, right? But privilege is not about money, and it is not about having an easy life. Privilege is about things that you don't have to think about. You don't have to navigate it. You never thought of it because it's never happened to you. So it works better with examples from me. So I do have a child. It has never once occurred to me to tell my child, do not wear a hoodie and run through our neighborhood at night. That never occurred to me. It was not something I was used to. It was not something I ever thought about. And I think what the goal is, we're trying to start to understand each other better, to think. People have to think about this stuff. Just because I didn't doesn't mean other people don't have to. I've never felt like people were watching me while I was walking through a store shopping. I've never really worried about going to a meeting and not having someone there who looks like me. So, we start to evolve, we start to get better. One of the closest and most meaningful stories and conversations that we had, there's a female senior executive that has always been a mentor and role model to me, and I feel very close to this person, and I feel like, we're part of the team, NASA can do anything, let's get us together, we can fix it, we can build it, we can do it. We have the brains, we have the intelligence, we have that capability. But my friend said to me one day, I don't want my son to work here. Now, my friend happens to be African American female, and I'm trying to process this. Wait, what? Why don't you want your son to work here? NASA's great. NASA's not great if you're African American male. We're getting better. We're still not there. We're working hard on it, but we're not there. But I think it's important that people are getting real about these things, that people are willing to have these incredibly difficult conversations with each other. What do? Let's reach out, and when we start a mentoring program, find somebody intentionally who doesn't look like you and talk to them, help them see how you see things, and they can help you see the world as they see it. And so it's about this collaborative effort. And I think it's really incredible what Nikki's doing with this Diversity Scholar program. I'm just thrilled to be here. And I think we can learn a lot from each other. And I can learn a lot from you all as well. And I think what's exciting to me is looking around the room and thinking, it's going to get better. And when we can have a group of individuals, as I think you guys are, it's the ability to look at what makes us different as a strength. And that's the world I hope you've grown up in. I hope the world evolves to be more like that. I'm really excited about a day when we aren't afraid to talk about it, when we aren't afraid to be real with each other, and when we aren't afraid to acknowledge we still got some changes we need to make. And so I'm kind of proud of the steps that my agency's taken. We get it. We still got a lot of work to do. We're working on it. We're trying to get better. We're trying to figure out how are we missing this and what do we do better. And so we brought in the next level down of senior leaders because and they're doing what we did with us. They're going through these exercises to build trust amongst each other across the agency, across our center. How do we build the trust? When you have this big group where it's safe to talk about these things, it eventually becomes safe for everybody to talk about them, right? And so that's where we're trying to get to, where we can acknowledge, like, pretend you don't see that I'm a woman. Okay, that's silly, right? So we're different, but it doesn't make us incompatible. It doesn't mean we can't work well together. And I just applaud y'all's efforts as a supervisor of attorneys. Thank you, diversity scholars, for taking some training from Nikki, because the skills she's helping you with will make you successful leaders of tomorrow. And I thank you all for having spent your time today to become incredibly successful leaders of tomorrow.